Welcome to Pivoting to Technology Adoption. I'm your host, Donna P. Mitchell, the Transformation Authority. Every week, I sit down with executives, strategists, and innovators to tackle the one problem no one's solving: why 70% of technology transformations fail. Let's pivot. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Pivoting to Technology Adoption. And I'm sitting up here giggling with Bryant Richardson. Bryant Richardson is somebody that I probably would have connected with in my past, especially when we start talking about the call center, contact center. I mean, that reminds me of the reservation center, but we will diverge into that right now. Let me tell you a little bit about him. Bryant is the founder and president of Real Blue Sky LLC, a consultancy dedicated to helping leaders turn customer experience into measurable growth strategy. With more than 30 years transforming customer experience for brands including Goldman Sachs, Dell, AT&T, Charter, Yummy Brands, and City Cards. He's got some big ones here, where he led multi-million transformation initiatives. That's why he's here on this show for technology adoption, because he knows a lot about that. Brian has held C-suite roles in Chief Operating Officer, Chief Information Officer across financial services, technology, telecom, healthcare, retail, and nonprofits. I'm not going to continue to talk about this. I'm going to introduce you to him. Brian, say hello to your audience and ours. You have so much here. I'm going to leave it where you've won awards and been in this for more than 30 years. Global Guru, top 30 customer service thought leader. I can go on and on. ICMI awards. Tell us some more about yourself so we can really dig in on what everybody needs to focus on now. Once they get the transformation adoption down, how do they improve the customer experience through that, before that, or even after it? Can you help us out?
Oh gosh, Donna, so much there that we can dig into. Thank you so much for that really fabulous introduction. I'm just delighted to be here with your audience and you.
I'm excited to have you. So tell us a little bit more about yourself and that customer experience. Why is that the most important part of today's business? And it's always the most important part: the customer, your internal customers, in my mind, and your external customers.
Donna, no question. The reality is no business exists without customers, right? We have to have some kind of a customer. Even the government has customers. As taxpayers, we're all
Mhm.
customers. And so, customer experience, growing up in the contact center professionally, a lot of times customer experience has been thought of simply as customer service. And the reality is, customer experience is a discipline that crosses the entire organization, from product development through marketing, sales. Certainly, customer service and support are a big piece of that, but they're not the only pieces. So, when I talk about customer experience, it's really about how the customer, whether it's a consumer or individuals with a business, experience the brand from the first time they encounter that brand, which might be through an advertisement or word of mouth referral, all the way through the last engagement they have with that brand and its products or services.
So when I looked up and tried to confirm a lot of your experience, and there's a lot there, what I didn't mention was the exact ICMI Top 25 Customer Experience Thought Leader 2025 and 2026. So in that role, it's imperative that in today's world, with all the AI and the adoption and the changes and the frequency and a lot of people are getting laid off, and there's a lot that's really been enhanced. What are the main trends that you're seeing now with customer service experiences that you'd like to share to those listening that are really questioning what's the next step? What do they do with this big budget and how do they succeed?
Gosh, there I think are a lot of questions in that, Donna. For starters, with regard to artificial intelligence in this space, a lot of what we're seeing marketed as AI is really high-end automation. And we've had automation for decades. You and I were talking about the contact center early on before we started recording this session.
Hmm.
And We've had IVRs, an auto attendant, press one for this, press two for that department. We've had that kind of automation in the contact center for decades and decades. And it is simply getting better and better. What I do see happening is oftentimes we're chasing artificial intelligence, and the cost is that we're not really focused on the customer experience and where the greatest
Mm.
challenges are. In fact, that's one of the biggest problems I see is when leaders are asking, how do we use AI? Instead of looking at the business and how they are encountering and engaging their customers and looking at where the biggest challenges are. And then for those challenges, what are the best solutions to achieve the end result? So when we take a look instead at the challenge first and look for the best solutions, I find that we're in a much better place in terms of how we engage both employees and the customer.
So, when someone's really trying to improve and achieve a higher level of customer experience, you have a framework, a craft framework, that I saw that you've mentioned previously, and I think that would be very informative if you could share that. Why did you choose that framework, and how is it working today with some of your clients?
Well, thank you for that question, Donna. The CRAFT Agilities Framework is something I've developed after, 35 years in customer experience management in the contact center, in direct digital database marketing, both on the in-source side as well as the outsource side of that space. And I've been able to see numerous global brands do a lot of things really well when it comes to the customer experience, and a
Mhm.
lot of things really rather poorly. And when I launched Real Blue Sky, which is about blue sky customer experience and making that a reality for our clients, when I launched that, it was really for the SMB and the mid market space who don't necessarily have the benefit of huge budgets to drive customer experience. And the craft agilities are really just this. Craft is an acronym, it stands for culture alignment, is the C. R is results, and that's about not only measuring the right things, measuring outcomes, not just activities, but also
Mm.
about driving continuous improvement. So think Six Sigma for service. The A is awareness, and it's about awareness of our customer, really understanding who they are and what they're looking for. And that theme really ties in nicely, actually, with technology adoption, both for the customer as well as for employees. F is for fitment. Fitment is one of those interesting words. It's actually from shipbuilding. So a fitment is
Mm.
something that you would attach to the ship that serves some purpose. That could be a railing, it could be a cleat for a rope, it could even be the controls at the helm. Those are all fitments. And I liken that to the people on in the organization. So kind of like the fitments on a ship. They all serve a purpose. The ship itself serves a purpose to get from port A to port B. And people change. We grow, we learn over time, and sometimes we need to move from one position, one function to another over time. And then T for tact. The tact agility is really about emotional agility in motion at the time that the individual employee is engaging with the customer. So that's the craft agilities, sort of in a nutshell.
Thank you. Um, when you have an organization, it seems like sometimes they don't have the right people in the room. Who do you feel should be in the boardroom? Is it all of C suite, some of C suite, middle management, frontline? How do you approach that when you talk to a client? What have you seen work and what have you seen that could have been better and they may have missed a step?
From the standpoint of adoption,
From the standpoint of adoption, transformation, digital transformation, I think from technology adoption or whatever you can share, because sometimes you may have some agreements where you can't share anything or not even pieces, whatever you're comfortable with. I've always thought it was helpful, and I've gotten a lot of compliments on this, to do this from an educational standpoint and not assume everybody really grasps the subject matter or how this really happens if there's a lot of gaps of knowledge. So some people call it digital transformation today. Back in the day, it might have been re-engineering culture change. So, I can go way, way back in the day, but we won't do that. But I think if you can kind of couch, the technology adoption today is really the gap from the C-suite to the front line that someone else may know differently. But I think if they hear an example on what you actually do
Mm,
with a
mm.
client, paint the picture, what was happening when you got there, and what was the success later. I think that's really what would be helpful to some of the executives listening and some of the solopreneurs that we have in mid-sized businesses as well.
No question. One of the things that we commonly see with our clients is that what we have in adoption gaps are really leadership gaps and experience gaps in disguise. They show up as adoption,
Mhm.
whether it's adoption of process, adoption of tools by employees or by the customer. And so the technology might be fine, but the experience still may not fit how people actually work. And so we find that the leadership has not been there. They've not really engaged end users in the process and understanding the nature of the work before they launched the technology. One client in particular actually just experienced a fail. Unfortunately, they were able to roll it back. They were adopting a new technology. They had been sold on how it would meet so many needs across the business. So it was really more of an enterprise resource platform, and it was an epic fail. It was something where leadership, and this is in the SMB space, they're a mid-sized, lower mid-market firm with multiple locations and multiple geographies, not just here in Texas where I'm located. And the reality is they had not looked at how a lot of the work is actually done by employees and were sold on what's arguably a very solid tool that simply was a really poor fit for their organization. It's because leadership did not listen to their front line, the individuals that would actually be using the tool set to understand how the workflow actually worked. And so when they tried to roll out the new solution, they had just a huge failure, no adoption, and the tool was not actually even doing what they needed in the organization. So they needed to upgrade some of their existing tools, particularly around people management, HR, recruitment, payroll, a lot of those back office functions. And the solution really did not meet those needs. So I would say the leadership gap is a huge piece of that. And if you're on the front end of driving transformation in the organization, whether you're large enterprise or an SMB, a small to mid-sized business, that leadership engagement with the people who are actually going to be using the tool set is absolutely vital, and understanding the experience that you need to create for them.
So as you talk about the experience, I believe you've got a book coming out, or you've got a book with the next customer service experience or customer experience. Tell us a little bit more about that. What is the next economy? What is going on with that?
So the next CX economy, CX being customer experience, is really about the fact that technology has leveled the playing field for organizations. So it used to be that when we wanted to purchase a product as consumers,
Hmm.
we had to go to the store. We had to typically a big box store, and we had available to us whatever was available through large manufacturers, large brands, and their distribution channels. Today, through the likes of things like Amazon Marketplace, Walmart's Marketplace, and numerous others, and the ease of communication, the ease of being able to manufacture things offshore, have them shipped to the US and sold through these distribution channels without an individual ever having to even see the merchandise, we've really leveled the playing field in terms of being able to deliver products to the marketplace, certainly here in North America. And so the real differentiator is not necessarily the product or service, as the case may be. It's not even the price point. A lot of these products are very inexpensive. It's really the experience and whether or not I, as a consumer, can trust the brand. And I might not trust necessarily a new brand I've never heard of, but I trust the marketplace it's being sold in because I know, let's say they have a solid 30-day guarantee and I can return the item if I'm not satisfied with the quality or whatnot. So, with that leveling of the playing field, it's really about how we create experiences for the customer, how we produce trust in that relationship that we have with the consumer. That's going to be what differentiates organizations, and that's what drives the economy as we move forward. I say that coming from the perspective myself as a small business owner, uh, recognizing that small businesses make up over 90% in the US, well over 90% of all business organizations. And yet we see such high failure rates among new businesses, over 90% in the first 10 years, a little bit less than that in the first five. And it's how we create experiences that is often the differentiator. And so it's in the new book, The Next CX Economy, that I introduced the CRAFT Agilities Framework, which is really a leadership framework at the end of the day, so that small and mid-sized businesses, those in the mid-market, those leaders have a framework beyond just delivering a great product or service that I found are the make or break points for the success of an organization and how they engage their customers.
Hmm. That's interesting. There's a lot to that because customer experience, customer service, I think, is the hallmark at the end of the day of success for businesses. So we've talked a lot about enterprise. I know I've talked a lot about enterprise, but you brought up small businesses, medium-sized businesses. And for those of them that don't want to be left behind, they keep hearing a lot about data. Um, and I'm sure when you work with a client, you still want to know about the data. So, what do you want to share? We didn't talk about this, but it just came to me that since I had you here about the customer experience, what does the small and medium sized businesses need to get their arms around? What they need to be doing first, second, and third to get the data or know what it is or how it is or get on the page of having the technology so they know they got data. Um, or how to get the data. Can you
Uh,
talk a little bit
oh
about that and
gosh,
break it down?
I love that question. So often when we work with small and mid-sized businesses, there's this sense that they are at a disadvantage relative to big business, large enterprise.
Mhm.
And the reality is, small and mid-sized businesses have much more agility. They're able to move much faster when they see a change in the environment. And so, if there's a change in customer behavior, certain products or services that aren't moving, new competitors that enter the marketplace, they're able to respond to that much more quickly. That said, oftentimes they don't have the discipline around collection of data, but they're usually using some kind of systems, whether it's POS or some management system specific to their industry. One of the stories that I tell in the book is about a dry cleaner. And so that's a theme that shows up is that direct to consumer business. It's a small local business, multiple locations, but it is local. And they've got specialized software that's available to them that they've used for years. The reality is they have a lot of data and they do have the ability oftentimes to export that data. And today with AI tools, tools like ChatGPT even that can be trained on data and can spot trends, they're able to do a lot more with that data today than we ever thought possible. So using AI as a business intelligence tool is incredibly useful.
That's a good idea for those that are listening and have been wondering about that. So, I noticed also that you are so entrenched in that customer experience, and that's a good place to be. And with the next economy, I'm curious in the contact centers and the next economy, the average contact center, they advance in technology and sometimes they get stuck. They get stuck in the routine, the monitoring, the quality assurance on how they do things. They may not have upgraded technology. What should a contact center today be doing in order to make sure that they're ensuring a good customer experience? And it's from the center perspective. Can you share some steps or what they need to be looking at or using, or what do you recommend?
Well, I probably recommend my book for starters, uh,
Okay.
because it certainly is geared toward the customer experience. But one of the things that I find, particularly in the contact center, is that we often talk about being customer centered or customer centric.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times, our culture, how we get things done in the organization, what gets rewarded or doesn't align with being customer centered. So, case in point, and you and I have some contact center experience in our backgrounds. So, we understand things like AHT, average handle time, which is how much time was spent with a given customer talking or with them on hold while we're looking up an answer. And then after the call, in after call work or wrap time, we would often call it in the contact center. And average handle time is a great metric to be familiar with, but the average handle time is going to vary wildly depending on the type of issue that the customer called in about or texted in about, whatever the case may be. And so if we tout a culture that is customer centered and then we manage individuals based on metrics that are essentially financially centered, such as average handle time,
Mm-hmm.
then we're sending a mixed message. It is a great tool to understand when someone perhaps needs more training, or maybe they've figured out a better mousetrap to solve a particular type of customer issue. But when we use it as a blanket uh, KPI, a key performance indicator to manage individual performance, we end up sending mixed messages as leadership. So culture alignment is a huge piece of that in the contact center. I will say, and I'll come back to that theme though, when we're trying to drive improvement, just throwing automation and artificial intelligence at the challenges of the contact center blanketly is not the way to approach that, because at the end of the day, you're going to spend a lot of time and money on an AI initiative that isn't necessarily going to yield improvements in the customer experience. And I'm a supporter of artificial intelligence. I think AI, like all automation, has an important place in customer contact. It should be handling uh, we would call it the low hanging fruit. Those items that are relatively easy, they're repetitive, there's not a lot of variation. The AI can solve for that easily. And look, existing automation can solve for that. We just get tired of pressing one for store hours and two for directions when we can now speak using natural language processing, which uses some generative artificial intelligence typically. But if we get to a place where we're trying to solve all of the issues,
Mm-hmm.
everything that a customer might call in about using artificial intelligence or some kind of automation, we miss the opportunity to connect on a human level with our customers. And at the end of the day, the brand is how the customer, whether it's a consumer or business, because businesses are made up of people, and the people are making decisions about whether to continue to do business with their vendors. So this applies to B2B and B2C both. How people feel about the organization and doing business with them, that is the brand. So if we make people feel like a number, if we make it difficult for them to get the answers they're seeking, and if we can't demonstrate some empathy when we interact with them on a human basis, then we're subject to losing those customers. And I think rightfully so. So while artificial intelligence is great for handling things that are relatively easy, and it could be as simple as, hey, where's my stuff? You recognized who I am based on the number I called from or based on the app and my login. And you can pull up relevant information about, well, what is the status of Bryant's orders right now? Ah, this one is shipped. It ought to be delivered tomorrow. Great. Those are things we could do before artificial intelligence. We can just do them faster today. But if I've got a challenge and it's not something that I can report through your app or your website, or through automation when I call in for service, I need to have an easy option to get to a live human that understands, that can empathize with that experience, and ultimately can solve the problem. So if we think that we can substitute all live representatives with artificial intelligence, I think we're missing the boat, sadly.
We're missing about. Some people really still think that. I'd like to go back to the numbers game in the contact center, the talk time, the handle time, the call work is what we used to call it. But we also had a conversion rate, a percentage, how many calls turned into, let's say, a P&R or a sale or a booking. And I'm curious to know if that's being utilized today in most places and spaces that you're aware of. And do they bring that into the quality mix versus just talking about how many calls in your talk time today? Because some of my interactions, just as a customer, I feel like they're in such a rush or distracted that they really missed what customer service or customer experience is about. It's about them more than the customer. Am I kind of looking at this differently, or am I too old school, or how are they working with the quality and the conversion piece? I didn't hear you mention that, and I'm curious about it.
Yeah, that's just a terrific question. A lot of organizations, and I come back to what we were just talking about briefly, they get to be in a rush because we're focused on average handle time typically or talk time and getting
Mhm.
to the next call. We may have too many calls in queue, and so we're just rushing through the process. And that's that tension between, are we customer centered? Is there really a focus on the customer and resolving what it is that they've called in or emailed or texted about? Or are we just trying to rush through and get to the next item, get it to a point that's just good enough so that we can move on to the next customer? And so that's that tension that we need to figure out as an organization. Are we truly customer centered? Are we trying to resolve the customer issue every time they call in? I tell audiences typically, I never have customers who call in to tell us what a great job we're doing. And invariably, there's someone in the audience who raises a hand and says, well, we do. They're few and far between. Typically, those calls, those emails are about challenges that customers are having, right? Now, one of the things that you raised is conversion rate. And depending on the certain circumstance, so for example, in an airline reservation center, well, yes, we certainly want to sell reservations. Ideally, today we're pushing that into apps and online, where hopefully
Mhm.
we've made it easier for the customer to see things in real time than it would be to speak about them over the phone if we can't actually see a screen. But that still applies in other environments where the conversion rate is important. I know I won't mention names, but there's some very large cellular telephone providers who are very strongly focused on making a sale, whether that's an upgrade, an additional device, an additional service, some kind of sale
Mhm.
relative to the number of calls that they receive for customer service or support. And so that is still very common practice. And look, I'm in sales. Whether we like it or not, we're all in sales of some
Yes.
kind, but it should be about providing the customer, whether it's an internal customer, external customer, business or consumer, it should be about providing them with something that they need, something that meets a need for that customer. Now, you bring up quality, and certainly all of these metrics should be coming into play in terms of how we measure quality. I remember back in the day, and you and I were talking before we started. Uh, Back in the day, we had quality assurance folks who were listening live to representatives who were on in real time with customers. That's where we got whisper tones, which would be where the supervisor might coach the representative over the phone, and it's a one way, so the customer doesn't hear. Only the representative hears the coaching in their ear. So there would be that live coaching going on and monitoring to ensure that the representative is doing the best possible job. Ultimately, we moved to making those quality assurance representatives more efficient by only providing them with call recordings after the fact to listen to, hopefully very soon after, so that there's meaningful coaching that can occur to improve performance, make sure that the representative fully understands policies, procedures, and whatnot. And we've gotten to this interesting point now where we're driving a great deal more efficiency into that with artificial intelligence, uh, to varying levels of success, but certainly there's a great deal of success to be had there. And the challenge that we had in quality is because of the sheer volume of customer contacts, we were always only listening to a very small fraction of
Mhm.
actual customer contacts, let's say phone calls, that were placed that an individual representative handled. And that representative is probably busy talking to customers about 80% of every hour that they're on the phones. So there are a lot of calls typically to be listened to. So with the sampling methodology, we just missed stuff. We didn't hear every time the representative got it right to give them an attaboy and reinforce good behaviors. And we certainly didn't hear every mistake and weren't able to coach them accordingly. But with artificial intelligence, we have the option, and it's become much more affordable now than it was, say, 10, 15 years ago when I first saw this emerging. We can have technology listen to 100% of calls and identify where there are challenges in the sentiment, where the issue wasn't resolved, where the representative didn't follow certain procedures that might be standard, might even be required from a regulatory standpoint, such as certain disclosures and whatnot.
Mhm.
And we can raise up those customer contacts then that don't meet certain criteria so that a human, a live quality assurance representative, can then listen to that call, validate it, and perform the appropriate coaching. So we are seeing some pretty significant
Okay.
improvements in that space. Uh, Again, as long as the deployment has been thoughtfully designed and
Mhm.
deployed.
Hmm. Wow. Okay, I'm glad to hear that. Sounds a lot easier too. So you are around healthcare, correct?
I do work with healthcare clients, among others, yes.
In the healthcare industry, right now it seems like AI is really moving towards diagnostics. But I think there's going to be an impact on the patient side, the physician side, the staff, the entire piece of it. But there can be some benefits, although a lot of physicians are a little bit leery. And what do you think some of the key trends we're going to see going forward for customer experience in healthcare? Because they have data everywhere. And then you got compliance and regulatory issues. Are we going to see the movement with AI in healthcare like people think, or is it going to be slow coming? I'm curious, and I'm sure others listening are interested in your opinion for healthcare AI.
So that's an interesting question because there are so many, as you know, so many complications to healthcare and healthcare information, privacy, and regulation. Uh, and there are just so many legacy systems, particularly with larger organizations, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
uh, pharmaceutical, whether it's insurance, and large providers. I think what we'll see as consumers who are experiencing healthcare services is we'll see more and more AI in the customer facing experiences, such as appointment setting, calling in with billing questions, that type of thing. And if we don't experience it personally, we're interacting with a bot of some kind, whether it's voice, chat, what have you. Then we'll certainly see it in terms of what we call agent assist. So that's where artificial intelligence is actually listening to the call or observing the chat, as the case may be, and providing the representative with help. Maybe it's a policy document, maybe it's pulling up a tool or pulling up account information during the call live. And the beauty of that, there's a huge upside to that, is that it allows the representative to focus less on their tools and more on the consumer, on the patient, which means particularly if they've been trained well and are able to employ their tact agility, then they're able to be more empathetic in the moment with that consumer, with that patient, as they're going through the process of resolving a medical situation, resolving a billing situation. There's no question, but we're going to see growth, huge growth from a diagnostic standpoint, in my opinion. And I'm certainly not a healthcare professional, but I see what's happening from a technology standpoint in that space. And so the ability to see things that might be emerging based on the symptoms that are being observed, reported, is going to be a great tool, I think, of agent assist for the representative on the phone. Physician assist, from a diagnostic standpoint, I think is just going to be extremely invaluable, and increasingly so over time. Physicians and other healthcare professionals that are patient facing
Mhm.
are under so much pressure from a time constraint standpoint to move to the next patient, that these tools are going to be invaluable then to allow that professional to either get to a diagnosis, summarize the experience for charting purposes, et cetera. What's interesting to me, and I've been able to work with some very large insurance providers, is when we get into large healthcare providers and big insurance firms, and that there are so many legacy platforms that are involved in the experience, that it's going to be more challenging for us to see AI bots in particular in use to help us get to real answers uh, through a bot. So, for example, take a case where you've got health insurance, you may be a family, you've got kids, and you're traveling, you're out of state, so you're not in your normal area, and you may have a health emergency or an urgent matter, and you call in and you want to know, do I have coverage out of state? Where do I need to go? What are my deductibles? What do I need to be concerned about? And by the way, can you refer someone who's near me? At the event that I was at with a large health insurance provider, where we were looking at innovation with technology in this space, one of the executives raised his hand and said, you'd have to connect to over a half dozen different legacy systems for that one simple situation, because we need to identify you. We need to authenticate you. We need to see what your coverage is. We need to look at the locale where you're at. There's so many systems that have to be touched for that one simple scenario, let alone something more complex. And because they're legacy systems, the integrations are the challenge. So if anything, we were talking about the ability of small businesses, mid-sized businesses to compete with large enterprise. It's because of that. When the large enterprise has multiple large legacy systems and integrations are very challenging, we're going to see those legacy organizations in healthcare and otherwise have a tougher time. It's going to take more time for them to deploy AI in those solutions because of the integration efforts. And again, that's where small and mid-sized businesses really have the upper hand, because they're able to be much more agile. They have far fewer systems and they tend to be easier to integrate with.
Wow, that's a lot. So nothing's really changed there, except there's still a lot of compliance. There's still a lot of regulations. You've got a lot of different legacy systems, but there's been progress. And we'll probably continue to see progress in healthcare, especially in the diagnostic space. But I do see what you're saying in regards to bots. People have to get used to dealing with a bot, especially early on. So before we close, who is your customer? Who should contact you? And how do you like to be reached?
Well, thank you for asking that. So our clients are, again, typically in the, I'd say, upper small to mid-sized market. They're looking to better engage customers and drive customer loyalty. So they may see that acquiring customers, retaining customers is harder than ever, and that they're working harder, but not seeing necessarily the best benefit from that. And so that would be a great client for us typically. And they could be in a variety of consumer facing or even business facing services. We do have a great deal of experience in the financial services space, technology, telecommunications, retail, healthcare, as well as nonprofits. So those are certainly great avenues. Uh, I'd love it if your listeners, if they're curious about the CRAFT Agilities Framework and the next CX economy, and that book should be dropping here in the summer. I'd love it if they would drop into thenextcxeconomy.com. That's thenextcxeconomy.com and just connect with us there. They can sign up for updates. They can stay apprised of the book as it becomes available and nuggets along the way. And we'll have some masterclass and some other bonus opportunities for folks that sign up for those updates there.
Hmm. It sounds like a good time. Before you go, you mentioned something that I forgot to ask you about, mission driven. You're involved with an organization, Embrace Waiting Children.
That's correct.
And I'd like to hear a little bit more about that and how you work with leadership in this space with the tech adoption, the transformation, customer experience. I mean, that's probably donorship, ministries. What do you see happening there?
Well, I see huge opportunities. A lot of those individuals, I'll say this. So I'm an adoptive parent, former foster parent of many years. EmbraceTexas.org is how Embrace Waiting Children can be reached.
Okay.
And they're focused, as you might imagine from that name, they're focused predominantly on Texas and serving communities in particular in North Texas who are in that foster adoption process and really helping the children, not just their caregivers, but helping the children that are in those circumstances. So many of them are aging out of foster care and they don't really have the support that they need to be successful as young adults. And many of them will be in service industry roles. And so I'm looking at ways that I could help along that path as well, so that they can be as successful as possible. But that's been a ministry that I've been really blessed to be a part of from advisory board originally back in, gosh, I want to say 2007, 2008.
Mhm.
And then their independent board of directors, which I've served on now for quite a number of years.
So when you work with mission driven or that organization in particular, there's got to be some differences between working with nonprofits than Fortune 100, Fortune 1000. Can you share some of those differences that one needs to pay attention to? Um,
Well, that's a terrific question. In the not for profit world, one of the things that we see is that our clients are often not the ones paying the bills. So, in a for profit organization, the client is paying for their service. And while you may have some of that, you're still reliant on donors. So you have donors versus clients. And then on the service side, you have volunteers versus paid employees. But what I find is that really every organization should be treating our employees, paid or otherwise, as though they're volunteers. They're free to leave at any time. And we should be purpose driven. So when we bring individuals into the organization, whether they are in a for profit organization or nonprofit, there should be alignment. We should know what our organizational purpose is. And for me, in for profit, it should be about, in my mind, servicing the needs of our customers. How do we serve our customers? And if we're bringing individuals who are employed voluntarily into the organization, they should be aligned on purpose to serve the needs of those customers.
so when you align the needs and you're working in that organization, how are they moving forward with the technology today? Are they moving forward? A lot of nonprofits and ministries aren't. They just staying where they are. They're going to ignore it and keep doing what they do and try to meet that goal. But are you seeing anything on the technology side, or trying to transform or any advances with that particular organization or any other nonprofits that you may interact with?
Oh, absolutely. And there's no question but that the availability of so many tools, and not just AI. Certainly generative
Mhm.
AI and the ability to use that for better quality communications is there, and I do see that. But beyond that, there are so many tools that are available to smaller organizations on limited budgets, from CRMs that are specifically focused on the nonprofit space, and some of those do a fabulous job, to how we integrate those with AI, and the kind of experience that we create for donors as well as clients, for volunteers as well as employees. Those same tools and the needs for those apply, and they've just gotten less expensive and easier to use. So those same needs still apply. We're seeing a lot in that market space. In fact, that's one of the areas from a CX or customer experience technology standpoint that we help clients with, is the selection process and how to identify what is hype, and what
Mhm.
really can serve the needs of that organization. So yes, there are certainly a lot of challenges in that space, but fortunately, there are a lot of great solutions as well.
Well, Bryant, I'm really glad that you're here on Pivoting to Technology Adoption. You've shared a lot of information between the Fortune 500, 1,000, mid-size, small, mission-driven. I think I've asked you so much. I better let you go.
We covered a lot of ground. Donna, thank you so much. It was a delight to spend this time with you and your audience.
Yes, and I'm glad to have you and do welcome back again. Thank you. And
Thanks
thanks
so
for listening
much.
to Pivoting to Technology Adoption, and we're shaping tomorrow together. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Pivoting to Technology Adoption. If this episode gave you something to think about, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a colleague who needs to hear it. My new book, Pivoting to Technology Adoption, Mind the Gap, is available now on Amazon. Visit pivotingportal.com to work with me directly. I'm Donna P. Mitchell, the Transformation Authority. Until next time, mind the gap.